What's going on, friends? It's Colin, and this video is for those of you who are interested in what goes on behind the scenes in the making of a record. And it's a conversation with myself and Ariel Posen, who produced my recent album, East of Nowhere. The conversation's hosted by Matt Carter of Grid City Magazine. So Matt's a champion of the arts locally here in the Fredericton area. Ariel's a dear friend of mine, and I had an amazing time collaborating with him on this record. If you haven't heard it yet, a link to where you can listen to it is in the description of this video, wherever you're seeing the video. And I hope you'll check out the music and hopefully tune in for a bit of this conversation. It's a long one, so you may want to look at it like a podcast. Anyway, we go deep into the details of how Ariel and I met, his thought process when producing music, my thought process when I'm writing songs, and basically how this whole thing came together. We also talk about the musicians that played on it, and anyway, I love this conversation. I hope you do too. Take care.
Getting ready for this, I was listening to your record again today, and it's a thing of beauty, Colin. You should be really fucking proud of this.
Thank you.
And then I was reading some of the notes from our interview a few months back, and so I guess to start at the start, can you give us a story of how you met Ariel and how your friendship formed?
Yeah, so, well, I'm actually, ironically, and I didn't even plan it, I'm wearing a Del Barber hat today. And Del is a good friend and one of my favorite artists to see. And I forget what the year was, if it was 2017 or 2018, where I was at the Living Roots Festival. I mean, I've performed in every one so far. And Eddie and I are always talking about, who the acts are, what are the shows, and I don't think I had seen Del live yet at that point. I was a fan of his music. So he was coming to Fredericton playing Grim Ross, and I was pumped. So I get tickets to the show, myself and a few friends. And Steve Hubbard, who has played with me a lot in the past, he was there as well. And go to this Del Barber show, and he's playing, and it's unbelievable. It's to that show to date is one of my favorite intimate performances I've ever been at. And there's this guy playing guitar with him that I wasn't familiar with at the time. And I had heard some rumbling that the guys from Morahubu had run into an Ariel Posen down at the Cap or something, and they were talking about it, but I hadn't really put two and two together. So now I'm watching this Del show. He's doing his thing, which is always unbelievable, and his sideman is there, playing guitar, just adding so much to the songs, and never overstepping. Everything he played was just perfectly serving the song, and it blew my mind. And then we get talking, or I'm talking to Steve before, as the band is just kind of finishing up. He goes, "Well, yeah, it's Ariel." I'm like, "Okay, now it all makes sense." And so we chatted a little bit afterwards. Steve is my two-rock buddy in Fredericton, Ariel, in case you're, if you don't remember
I
him.
know Steve. Yeah, of course, yeah.
So anyway, just chatting with Ariel and Del afterwards, and they were on their way to the next stop. And that was kind of it for that year. And then when Harvest 2019 was coming around, that was it was a big one for us, because we got to play the Mojo tent on the same night that Jason Isbell and the 400 unit were over in the blues tent. So I'll forever have my little placard from the headline acts, or the main stage acts of that night. And there's Isbell, the Trans-Canada Highwaymen, a couple others, and Colin Fowlie. I'm like, that goes in the bio. But Ariel was playing, I think, the next night, opening for Nathaniel Rateliff. And CHSR had set up an interview with him, and Aaron Bond reached out to me to say, do you want to lead this interview? I'm really good friends with all the folks at CHSR and volunteer some of my time with them when I have the opportunity. She goes, "You know more about his music," because by that point I had really done a deep dive on what he had done, and he had the one album out at that point, which was a work of art, and I love it. And she knows, or she knew that I knew his music. You're not going to ask all the same questions everyone else does, so it'll be a little bit more interesting. So that's when we kind of exchanged contact information, and I was at his show that night, just took a couple of cool shots, texted them to him. We chatted at the merch table afterwards, and he went on about his business, I went on about mine. And I mean, it's no secret that I'm kind of starting this career of mine in my 40s, which is I know that they say don't date yourself, but I mean, it's pretty hard to hide the dad bod and the gray beard. You know, I can't pass for 25, so we might as well just face facts. And
Embrace it.
exactly, right? It's a thing. Chris Stapleton's made this whole look cool, so it's great. I look the exact same when I'm completely dolled up for a show as I do when I roll out of bed in the morning, and I go with it.
Hell yeah.
But I had made the first album, Party Music, and we had kind of done that just in my spare time. I was still working a full-time career at that point, and I was working with Stephen and Jay at Marshall Studios, and we would just pop into the studio whenever we could find some time. So the whole process took like 8 months, and I'm really happy with what we created, and those guys are amazing friends and great to work with. And it was a little bit all over the place. I didn't know what my sound was, and I hadn't really refined my songwriting at that point. I was still trying to sort of discover who I was as an artist and where I was going to go. And with my second album, again, not getting any younger, I want to make a big statement. I know roughly how I want things to sound. I had, been songwriting more in a particular vibe genre, if you will, and started to put together a plan in my head. Okay, I'm going to do a second album. I want to make a really big statement with this. Who can I get involved that has the musical mind that I would want to help me achieve my goals? And Ariel was the first name on my list. I had a list of 3 or 4 that I would go down through. And I texted Ariel first. And again, just we've shared this story before where I was driving with my wife and she's like, "You're breathing heavy." But he texted me back right away and said, "Yeah, man, I'm in. Let's talk." And so that's kind of how it started. And then throughout the early part of last year and into the beginnings of the pandemic, obviously we had to keep refiguring and changing our plans. We had discussed maybe at one point he would come out to New Brunswick. There's a couple of studios we can work in here. But once everything sort of fell into place with the pandemic, and a lot of bad has happened, but I honestly am happy with the way that this turned out. He's like, it just probably makes the most sense for us to meet in Winnipeg. I have people there that I know and trust. I know we can get this thing done efficiently. We're going to be able to, save you some money, knowing that you're going to have to spend 2 weeks in an Airbnb quarantining. So, just kind of put together a plan based on that and booked. I was on vacation with my family, booked the flights, and we convened in Winnipeg, did our quarantines, and hit the studio and went our separate ways. And I quarantined again.
Ariel, have you? What's your history producing records for other people?
I've been doing it on and off actually for the last 10 years. I don't like my list of albums and recordings that I've just played on is 100 times the size of my production list. But I have produced a few. I have produced a handful of things. Generally, artists in the same vein as what Colin's music is. It's like that rootsy singer-songwriter type thing. I have started co-producing my own music and other bands also in the same vein I had been producing, and I've just in the last 12 years or so, just a lot more experience, not only as an MD on gigs as a sideman, where you're kind of essentially the producer of a show and on the band on the road. Even though it's not your band, you're in charge of making the set list, making sure with the artists that they're happy. You're making transitions, you're making moments in the show, you're making sure everyone's playing the parts right, everything's sitting right. The same thing really applies to producing a record. And yeah, I love doing that kind of stuff. I have been doing it, like I said, not as much as just being a regular recording session man, but the more and more as the years go on, I have been doing a lot more of it. And it's just, it's an opportunity to, of course, be creative, but to really dive into a project that isn't your own, but you hold that same accountability, because your name is on it as well. It's like it's your project. You want to make sure it's as good as it can be, at the same time making sure the artist's vision is exactly where they wanted it to be. And it's it's a fun challenge, and it's a fun just adventure getting there. And I know we'll get into it, but like Colin, couldn't have been easier. I do remember when Colin first called me, I was going to say, right before Harvest Fest, I was doing a course in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is basically like Tampa. And it was like 35 degrees outside. And I went outside to take the call, and we were just doing this interview and chatting. And I remember walking back in after, because I was wearing like a jacket, because we were filming. I was filming a course. And I walked back in, and I was actually soaking. They're like, well, it was a serious phone call. I was like, well, yeah, but it's so hot here. No, but meeting Colin for the first time, I do feel like we hit it off. Such a nice guy, such a great attitude. And those are the things that like make me want to work with someone and draw myself to someone. Is just, okay, yeah, is the music good? Yes. Is I don't know, where are all these things at? Okay, but how is he or she as a person? Nice person? Probably I'm in, And it was just very natural. Yep, got a little bit of a hang in at Harvest. And yeah, we were going to originally, I believe, Colin, maybe I'm wrong, but I recall us shooting for like spring, April or May 2020 originally, that we were going to do this. And then, we had to push back to the end of the summer. But yeah, like you said, I think it all worked out the way it was supposed to. I think at that point, we were all kind of used to how the pandemic was and how we were all living in lockdown. And it probably just gave Colin time too to just like solidify the songs and the amount of songs rather than just like jumping in. Time is always going to be on your side for something like this. The more time you give yourself, the better. So I'm glad with how it all came together.
Yeah, like, after we had delayed and once we were in the heart of the pandemic, I mean, that's when I wrote songs like To Mend and Overcompensating and
there you go.
Maybe even Your Parade. But, so some good songs came out of the wait that I think are standouts on the record. So I'm glad that, everything did. It worked out the way that it was supposed to. And I'm super happy with the result.
So you agreed to meet in Winnipeg to do this project, or to lay the groundwork for this project, I guess. Colin, you went out and you had to, was it 2 weeks isolation that you had to do?
Yep.
I forget, like the rules change from time to time, I can't remember.
It was 2 weeks, so I got a little bachelor condo in the Exchange District, right across from like the MTS Theater or something down in, I think is what it was. It's like an art center.
yeah.
And yeah, I hung out I had a nice view of downtown Winnipeg. I didn't actually even leave the room for the 2 weeks. I had groceries dropped at the door, and yeah, it was something else when I was able to finally get out of that little bachelor apartment.
Yeah, that.
I should say too that because, I'm telling Colin, hey, fly across the country, meet me in Winnipeg. First of all, there's a lot more expenses that come with, okay, now you got to fly here. Oh, and now you got to put yourself up for 2 weeks. These were just these kind of built-in things that were like, okay, it is what it is. We're kind of stuck with that. Mm-hmm. So I honestly would have had the same team of people anyways, and we would have done it basically the same way, but there was no cutting corners in any way, but like I wanted to also make sure anything I could do once we began to, like, we could find ways to, ease the financial burden. So whether it was just like picking up, like chauffeuring Colin around, or, doing the sessions at the drummer's studio rather than at another studio in town. There was these little things. Honestly, though, it all made for the vibe, and it was all perfect. And yeah, you were in a great area. It's actually too bad that you didn't get to... well, to be honest, the Exchange District is fantastic. During a pandemic, when there's nothing going on, it's like anywhere. You could be anywhere, and it just feels like a place because nothing's really going on. But, yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to jump the gun, but during that quarantine, I typically, when I'm producing a project, I want I want to hear all the songs that we're working with. I want to hear everything that's on the table, right? And Colin had 20 songs, which is awesome because the more you have, the more you have to choose from. And we did about, I want to say 3 or 4 Zoom sessions where, well, first, before that, I listened through all the songs. I went through all the songs, and I told him, there's 12 here that I feel really strongly about. Maybe do you want to do like 10 of these or something like that? And we ended up deciding, well, let's just do 12. Let's just do them all. And so from there, we go through the lyrics, we go through the arrangement. I look at certain things. I say, this chord could maybe be this, or I don't think we changed a single lyric thing because the lyrics were so great. It was more so just little arrangement things, cutting.
We added some lyrics because you wanted to expand on some musical ideas, and having more lyrics to fit that would have been beneficial. But
yes.
But I don't think we
Right.
edited anything that existed. We just added to it a little bit.
That's right. I forgot about that. It was just like my job as producer often is just trimming. How can we trim and how can we make this efficient and have as much impact as possible? So we did a few sessions of, I'd have my notes, I'd have charts of everything and lyrics, and we go through each song. And once Colin and I were happy, and I made sure Colin was satisfied, and I got to say, Colin was just, it's not even that he was so easygoing, he was just so easy to work with and relaxed yet really driven, and could take constructive criticism, could take ideas, was never shutting anything down, was always open to a different direction, and just had a really open mind, which I think as an artist, this specifically is one of the most important things. If you have a very close-minded attitude when making a project, your project's going to sound a little closed-minded. And Colin had a vision, yet he also had this wide-open canvas that he was willing to, throw shit at, for lack of a better term, throw shit at the wall and see what stuck in the best way. And we took those songs. Since Colin was still in quarantine, I went to Cody and Julian, who was the bass player and the drummer at the studio, and we started playing through the songs. We had Colin on Zoom feeding him audio through the studio, and we would play through the songs, and he would be playing along at home, and we would just make sure that normally we would do a rehearsal like this. This is called pre-production, and we would do this in person, but advantages of, the time we're living in, it worked. Not ideal, but it totally worked fine, and that allowed us to see that the band was doing the right thing, and specifically that Colin could hear what the band was doing and see if anything was rubbing him the wrong way, and I'm pretty sure it was pretty flawless. It went pretty fantastically. Everyone prepped, did their job, and...
It was
this while you were in the Airbnb in Winnipeg?
Yeah, so I was in the Airbnb in Winnipeg. They hooked me in through Zoom into the studio. So they did a rehearsal, like a run-through, 2 days before I was released from quarantine, because the first day that I was allowed out of quarantine was our first day of recording, and that's the day we did our bed tracks. And these, just to back up for a second, on my first album, I was still trying to be easygoing and whatnot, but I was a little more precious about things and pushed back on some more ideas, and I think that ultimately looking back, it had kind of hurt the project a little bit. Had I been, I kind of had my idea, it was my first record and all that. So one of the reasons that I wanted Ariel involved, and I'm so grateful that he was, is because I had heard enough interviews, listened to his music, and he's a musical mind that I trust more than my own. So it's like, here, man, like you make suggestions, I'm gonna roll with it. And had anything actually rubbed me the wrong way, I obviously would have spoken up. I'm very, very passionate about the project, but I think that just he knew where I was at, and he just fit right into that groove, and it was amazing.
And you mentioned earlier, and you kind of drop these every once in a while, that you get into music a little bit later in life than some performers do. But there's several advantages to that, and I think this, what we're just talking about here, is a big advantage to that. Having life experience gives you an understanding about you learn to appreciate the input of others more so than a singular vision. I think when we're a bit younger, we're full of piss of vinegar, and we've got our ideas, and we want to see our ideas come to life. And it takes experience working with others and experience in life, developing friendships and relationships to understand that sometimes the best benefit is to share your ideas and work with others to bring them to fruition. So I think, I think that ties into this project quite nicely. Like Ariel saying how easygoing you were to work with. You might not have been easygoing when you were 21.
Oh hell no. I mean, when I was 21, I was fueled by coffee and ramen noodles and ego, right? And I think it takes a few years to have the ego kicked out of you, and having the opportunity to work with people that inspire and humble you. And the longer you live, the more of those experiences you have, and you kind of bring a different perspective as you grow. Like if you're the same person that you're at 30 as you were at 20, then you've probably done something wrong in 40 versus 30. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just the sum total of my experiences, and 22-year-old me would have been a pain in the ass. So,
yeah,
but
I find
oh, sorry, go ahead.
when we're like as an artist, your ego in a way is part of what fuels you to go deep into your passions.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time you're in your late 20s or your early 30s in some cases, you switch, and then you spend the rest of your life pushing your ego down and getting rid of it, and realizing that yes, it's fulfilled its job as a driving force.
Yep.
And now it's time to put it to rest. I think that's just another aspect of experience. And
even ego aside, I'll speak with my own experience. Like I started my solo thing. I've been playing gigs since I was like 14. I've been doing this a long time now. But I didn't start my solo thing until I was 30. And whether you're 30, whether you're 40, I couldn't have done it any earlier. No ego, no nothing, simply just based on experience and not having an understanding specifically for the craft and how to do it the right way, know how to do this, know how to connect with someone through song the right way. Like I'd been writing since I was 18, but I'm not proud of any of those early songs. I needed all that experience to teach me, this is how I should be approaching this. And no matter what age you are when that finally happens, we all need everyone wants to label you. They want to give you some kind of title. They want to give you some this, and whether that has to do with age or not. I think we live in a time now where age doesn't even matter. I mean, look at Colin connecting with a bunch of, I'm sure, from kids to adults, like on TikTok, teaching guitar and stuff like that. Does anyone ask how old he is? No one. This is one of these things that does not matter, and that's a platform where primarily young people are on. If you connect with people and you know what you're doing and you just have that, then you have that, and that's all that matters.
Okay, so you bust out of quarantine and you're in the studio. There's a band already in place. You rehearsed for a couple of Zoom sessions, and then you basically just step into some comfortable shoes. Like you walk into basically a group of strangers who know your music very well, and you're off. Tell me about you did all the bed tracks on the first day, and guitars the next couple. Were you in there 3 days?
So we were in 4 days. So day one was bed tracks. I came in, met the band, and then I was promptly given a cup of coffee and shuttled upstairs in the studio to an isolation room with my guitar and a microphone. So I was playing along while the band laid the bed tracks, so that to cue them through the song. Ariel was playing guitar as well, although the intent wasn't to keep anything that I was doing or that Ariel was doing, which is a story for maybe later on. But because the stuff that he, as he would put it, I'm just playing bullshit to fill some space here. And we wound up keeping not a ton of his bullshit, but enough that it's noteworthy. So
Some of it.
So
yeah.
anyway, I went up into a room and I played along. They were down on the main floor, and in one day we laid down the beds for all 12 of the tracks, 11 of the tracks, I think, and then one of them was just going to be percussion and bass, and Cody and Julian laid those down on their own that night. So by the time we came back for day 2, we had all 12 beds done.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a part of something that was so incredibly efficient. I mean, we were destroyed. We were wrecked at the end of that day. That was a long day, because for those of you that have never experienced just even being in the studio, the amount that you're listening and using your ears there was just so much more stress to it than a normal day of, hey, I'm going to put Spotify on and listen. You're listening to everything, you're redoing, your ears get fried. And when your ears get fried, it's more tiring than like being physically tired. You know, it's more tiring than going for a run sometimes. You know, Colin's music on this record, there's everything from like, you know, medium tempo, like foot, hand, foot, hand, which is, I call that as like your typical kick, snare, hat type of stuff. There was a variety of feels, and a lot of the feels, you know, luckily weren't as strenuous on a drummer. So like songs like Circle K, Overcompensating, To Mend even, Bridge to Nowhere. There's a lot of brush work and a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's not that kind of stuff is easier, but physically it's not as demanding. And I feel like the variety really worked in our favor to get through a bunch. And what can I say? The guys just nailed it.
They really did. They really did.
They really did. And it's a little ambitious. I know that Colin said we were there for 4 days. We did have more days if we needed. But I mean, you know, first of all, the way I was thinking about it was like, okay, Colin's already been away from home and his family for 2 weeks. We finally started the work and the reason why he's here. You know, if there's any way to maybe send him back home early as possible, while not rushing and not like taking shortcuts or anything like that, that would be great if we could do that. So that was always something at the back of my mind. I didn't want to waste his time. But yeah, the beds were done. We did, I believe, acoustics after that, and then Colin's vocals. So once the beds were done, I mean, those 4 days, Colin was working hard. That was his. I mean, that's when all his work was put in. You know, once he was gone from Winnipeg, it was just listening and notes and giving opinion. That was his time. Just while I had him there in person, in real time, it was really important to get all his stuff done. So, like, you know, a full day of acoustics.
It was a day and a half of acoustics and a day and a half of vocals. So we did 1 day beds, day and a half on acoustics, day and a half on vocals. That was our 4 days.
Right. And that's crazy, too. I mean, 12 songs. Colin sang his ass off. The way I like to record vocals is typically, you know, we'll do at least anywhere from 4 to 6 to 7 takes. Sometimes you just have it, and like maybe some songs were less than that, but like I had Colin singing a lot. His voice was probably feeling pretty. It's too bad you couldn't go on tour right after recording that, because I'm sure your voice was
it was
pretty nicely.
having not used it for a live performance or anything other than singing to myself kind of quietly in my Airbnb, right? So it was like not having exercised for 6 months and then deciding to go for PRs on every lift you do, right?
Yeah.
So you know, impressive use of time, and I know what you mean about those, about the exhaustion that comes from those kind of sessions. Like, you leave something like that, like a day that's that full, you're excited, you know, and half of your brain says, yeah, like, let's go have a beer and talk about this, and the other half, or maybe like 3/4 of your brain says, let's go to bed right fucking now, because there's nothing left in the tank. Those are great, though. That's a sign of like a productive day.
I mean, I can't even consider the idea of doing anything social after. Because keep in mind that these are like 10-hour days roughly. But 10-hour days of nonstop listening, performing, listening, performing, listening. The only thing I have energy for is to just fall back onto something soft and rest and then start up again. It's just
Yeah, I would go home and
So
I'd go back
tired.
to the Airbnb and have a couple of club sodas and a microwave dinner, and I was binge watching Homeland at the time, or something like that on Netflix, and just flake out in the bed, and that was it till the next day.
So then you wrap it up, you hop a plane back, and you kind of repeat the process, right? You're now you're at home, but you also have to isolate for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that means
Yeah, so we set me up. So my house is a split level. So the basement, we were able to quarantine me in the basement away from my family. There's a bathroom downstairs. We brought down like a kettle, and so I had all the amenities I needed other than a kitchen. And so they would bring food down. So the stairway goes like from the front door up, and then a few steps to the basement. They would bring me my food down to the landing, and they would go away, and then I would come get my food and leave my dishes. And that was kind of, they were feeding the troll in the basement for 2 weeks, and and during the days we were back on Zoom, so there was still things that needed to be added to the record, and
I should say quickly too, at the time when Colin came to Winnipeg, summer of 2020 was almost COVID-less. Like we had maybe anywhere from 0 to 10 cases all summer. I'm not even joking. They're doing the worst now in North America, but last summer we were doing the best. And normally you would not be able to put a bunch of people in a room or a house and
right.
like mass gatherings. So like it's important to mention that. Well, first of all, everything was safe, of course, but like that was at a time where it's almost like COVID wasn't. It could go to a restaurant, you can go to the mall, you could go anywhere. I think it was important to point that out. But yeah, Colin, 4 weeks total of quarantine. So I wanted to make sure that, first of all, I like to do everything. I don't like to wait too long. So like when working on a project, it's not that I want to rush it and get it done with, but it's more so like staying in that mindset and just staying in that trench, if you will. I want to keep the ideas flowing. So I was like, okay, Colin's going to be sitting at home with nothing to do. I knew that I was going to do all the electric guitars. I had played some piano at Cody's at the studio just because he's got a piano there as well, but that was all done. I'm going to sing some background vocals. Why don't I do this now while Colin is home? And like I have a studio set up here, and I had Colin on Zoom every time. So I would just, I'd go through each song, and I have a process of how I record, specifically when I'm producing too. It's all about serving the song. It's all about finding the right part, the right moment. And yeah, it was really nice having Colin along. Again, I don't think you ever told me one thing you wanted to hear, one suggestion. I'd always say, hey, what do you think of this? Do you want to hear something else? And you were just a fly on the wall. Very, very polite and easy to work with.
Well, I was taking the opportunity to learn, right? That was, for me, I was getting to watch somebody who's a master of their craft do, work in front of me. And for me, that was a great opportunity in all of this. And it's something that I've taken away for the next, ever since in quarantine. Like when you see me disappear off social media for a little bit when I should be hustling or telling people to listen to my music or buy tickets to my shows, usually I have my head down in my basement trying to figure something out that I've been inspired to kind of grow as a musician, watching that, realizing that like here's where Ariel's at. I've got so far to go, and I'm not saying that in a self-deprecating way. It's just it's inspiring, and it fuels me mentally, and so that's been one of the things that I've been taking advantage of is. Have I put in like 10,000 hours as a musician? Yes, I have. I mean, it's been a hobby for years. But when it comes to like guitar playing and just, even looking at maybe producing some stuff on my own, it's just been a learning experience. And I've been trying to sponge up as much of that as possible. And so it's been really good that way.
Is it worthwhile talking about the people that played on your record?
100% it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back. I don't mean to. I meant to interject this earlier, but I missed my spot. Let's talk about the bass and drums. Who are the players and how did they get involved? Is that your band, Ariel?
Yeah, it is actually. Julian Bradford on bass, plays bass in my band. Cody Iwasiak on drums has played in my band. The thing about those guys, I mean, bigger than just playing in my band. I mean, I've been playing music with those guys. I've been playing with Julian for 15 years. I've been playing with Cody for almost a decade. Like, it's just history. And I have my people in town. You know, there's a lot of people I could have chosen who would do a great job. But I also wanted people I could trust, people who understand the genre, people that understand serving the song, are nice people. I'm not saying the other people aren't nice, but just like easy to get along with for someone new like Colin to just come in. You know, it's got to be people that like will welcome Colin with open arms and make him feel comfortable that, hey, thanks, you've come all the way here and we're playing on your songs. You've never met us. I wanted that trust both ways. So they're great for that. Cody also has a home studio, which is also very useful. Not trying to say that that's the only reason he played. He played because he's a fantastic drummer, and he actually gets really fantastic drum sounds, bass sounds, vocals, acoustic. He's got a beautiful old piano that we felted, and we got a lot of great vibes there, backbeat recording. Yeah, and it just trust. It's just those are some of my guys, and
they were almost like telepathically connected when we were going for a particular vibe or sound. Like Ariel would mention like some recording from this band, deep cut at year X. We're going for something like that. Gotcha, bang, and they would lay it down the next take. It's like, okay, all right, I see how it is. Yep,
total pros,
big time,
total
big
pros.
time. Yep.
So in your home, you got is there pedal steel and organ on this as well?
Yes.
Are those the other? Is there other?
So those were hookups from Ariel. So he reached out to a couple of folks that he knew that were specifically set up as well to record their instruments at home, and it was Kevin Gastonguay on Hammond B3 and Gideon Boley on pedal steel. And Gideon is in Nashville, and Kevin, I believe, is in Minneapolis. And
so Kevin's a friend. I met him through Corey Wong. And I've done a handful of playing with them, so him and I have struck up a friendship. And I've played on his record, and he's such a tasty, he plays whirly, keys, piano, everything, B3, and yeah, he played on my record. He played on a couple tunes on Headway, and I knew that he had a nice setup for B3. Leslie, it's like not him plugging into a Nord and sending it. It's like the real thing. And he just got the touch, and I know we had talked about Passerby being more of a B3 feature, and I just wanted someone that could play, and by play I mean improvise and like have that kind of vocabulary. So he was absolutely perfect for it. Gideon is a friend of mine. He's a young guitar player, also plays pedal steel. I know a handful of pedal steel players, and I had just seen that Gideon was doing some stuff, and I thought it would be a cool opportunity just to combine circles and get a feel. Like he's always playing with country artists and doing that kind of stuff. So he's got the vocabulary. He knows what it needs.
I think in his bio it says he's played on like Sam Hunt tracks and stuff like that have been hits, and yeah.
There you go. Well, he all he played was the right stuff as well. It was just gorgeous. Both guys elevated just what they needed to do. There was no let me shine here. They did exactly what we asked, and it was just the final icing on the cake that was needed to tie the bow on these songs. Sonically.
Yeah, the texture on the album is fantastic. Like all the instrumentation, the voices, just they lift up. They lift up your words, Colin. And your words are next level, I think.
Thank you.
I played your first album a lot, and this seems like a new musician. Do you want to talk about maybe how, first of all, before we get into like songs, maybe how you approached sharing your songs with Ariel in terms of lyrics and arrangement. And Ariel, can you comment maybe on what is it like to receive a batch of songs from a musician that you've never heard before, and then dissect them and and think about ways that you can build and reinforce what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, first things first. I am not as producer. I kind of alluded to this earlier on, but I don't want to receive music and then go, okay, let's rip this apart and make it however I want it to be. That's not my job. My job, I just want to take what I've been given and make that as great as we can make it. So, getting a batch of 20 songs from someone like Colin, the things I'm listening for is strong lyrical content, like a story, a good narrative, cohesiveness. Musically speaking, I'm listening for interesting arrangement, maybe like a really nice melody, chord structure. I just need to connect with it. And if I connect with it, I'm pretty convinced that everyone else will connect with it. It's not just like I'm the barometer. It's just that, like, if a song connects with you, it's going to connect with people. And it just comes down to that cohesiveness. So when I was picking my favorites, it really came down to that. I was like, okay, they were all great songs. Even the other 8 songs that were not chosen, Colin could easily make a record out of those songs too. But this is the beauty about batching your songs when you make a record. The more you have to choose from, you really hone in on what the best ones are. And yeah, it was just, I felt that the songs we picked had the strongest lyrical content, told the strongest story, had greatest potential for musical moments and arrangement. And that's basically what it came down to. Obviously, I had Colin would send me all the lyrics. I charted out all the songs just so I could visually see the changes as well.
We'll have to talk about JP too. The work with JP was a whole different phase of stuff. He mixed the record.
Yeah, JP Larondo is another dear friend of mine. I have worked on countless projects with him. I have produced a handful of projects with him, engineering and mixing. He has a studio in town as well, which was very much on my list to do the record. And in fact, I think a big reason we didn't do it there was just timing and availability. So JP, I met through Del Barber. JP mixed and engineered Del's first 2 records and Prairieography, which I also played on. So again, I have a lot of history with Del. He's a dear friend of mine. I've spent years on and off playing in his band and playing as a duo. I've had a long history with JP as an engineer, mixing, recording. So I feel very comfortable with him. And I have a few guys even in Winnipeg that I have that relationship with. But, I know that Colin is a big fan of Del, and that kind of music, JP really excels at it. He gets it. He just gets that genre, and he has a lot of experience with it. So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer. And I didn't like strongly suggest we should use JP. I think I maybe suggested a couple people,
You did.
But I was like, by the way, this JP is the guy that did these records that you probably are aware of, that you like. Check them out, see if you're into that. And to get Colin very easygoing, and he just trusted my advice on that regard. Alternatively, when I talked to JP, I showed him some of Colin's music, and he was floored, and he was really inspired, and he was really into it as well. And that's a good sign. So there was from both ways a seismic appreciation from Colin and JP towards each other.
Well, we just decided to send him like one test track to see if it was the right fit, and
Right.
and the track that we sent him was To Mend, and when he sent back the mix, we went through many revisions of the mixes, but when he set back like his first vision of that test track, I cried. I was like, oh, okay, this is beautiful. So we knew we had hit a home run in hooking up with JP.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Again, he gets the genre. He likes that music. He listens to that music, and he has a history working on that music like that. And he's also someone that takes direction very well and is just happy to chase things. So I think it's important, specifically on this record, that like each song, I'm sure we'll get into it, has a different tone to it and a different approach, and yet all cohesive, if you will. And he was really pivotal in like giving each song its own mood and its own color. You know, I think he really was the right fit for it.
Your comment about being moved to tears, Colin, that's like a kind of a gauge that I use for my own, I guess, how I rate music in terms of like, and it doesn't matter if it's Iron Maiden or Steve Earle or the Tannehill Weavers, if there's a song that or just a melody that can move you to tears, that your eyes water up, then you know those are the records that are lifelong companions, you know.
For sure. And just something for the younger folks out there, you cry more after 40.
Yeah.
Once you realize you're past the 50-yard line, you start to really embrace the beauty of you're likely at the 50-yard line of life. You start to look and appreciate these things and the beauty in them a little bit more, and you stop being nope, it's not going to make me cry.
Right. Yeah,
so I can't help it
that
anymore.
traces back to like what we said about ego earlier. Like once you get rid of that, once the ego is not a driving force in your life anymore, I think the beauty of the simplicity of life, the simple things that every day, you know, like the way the trees look after a heavy rain, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's just, you know, life is a lot richer that way, I find.
The ego's still there in the car. It's just kind of sitting in the back seat, messing around on its tablet now, and occasionally it'll chime up and you just like, shut up back there. Like, you know.
The songs on this record, like I think when I listen to it, I hear the strength comes from the arrangements. We talked about that. The lyrical content is deep. The stories, there's so many stories that are like they're like short stories. Like you go in, there's characters, there's a narrative, there's an arc, and they work remarkably well with your voice. I know that sounds silly to say because you're the one that wrote them, but it's that combination of lyric, voice, and melodic accompaniment is so strong on this album, and I'm not just saying that because you're a friend. I really feel that it's some deep stuff. Do you want to talk about? Let's talk about some of the songs.
Sure.
But to start, like, do you ever stop and think what it is, why you write music, what it is about the stories that you tell that attracts you?
The songs, the stories that turn into songs, they tend to be ideas that just wind up getting lodged in my brain, and sometimes, most often, it's like a little piece of a conversation that I overhear out, or a conversation that I'll actually be engaged in, or something that I'll read, and just this one idea will get lodged in my head, and I'll start, you know, wrapping some fiction around it. Like all the songs, to quote Donovan Woods, all my songs are true and all of my songs are fiction. There's a bit of both in pretty much every one of them. But it's so true. I think like he obviously has a way with words. He's an extremely successful songwriter as a result. He also has one of the funniest Twitter feeds going. But you know, that's kind of how they come about. So these are songs or stories that I feel passionate about, and some of them come from my own experiences directly, and some are indirect. You know, people that I know in my life that are going through something, or you know, there's a couple of songs on the record that are about my kids, or started for my kids and then became something else. Like To Mend, the first verse was about my daughter, and then the pandemic hit while we were in the hospital after she was having surgery. So there's a verse for her, there's a verse about the pandemic. And then I was writing the bridge as I was reading the news story about the events in Portapique, Nova Scotia. So the line, "The devil you know is the devil we're facing." They knew who the perpetrator was, and he was dead, but they were still finding the carnage. And we've got a few more angels left yet to come, because we just don't know what's happened here. And so these are all things that come out of the air, and I just kind of channeled them through lyric. And had I not explained where that bridge came from, I don't know if anyone would have known. It was just kind of a piece of the song. It kind of dovetailed into the talk about doctors and people that actually look after the health of people without getting credit, because the credit goes to God when miracles happen.
The theme that kind of ties all these songs together to my ears is that you're saying life isn't pretty. Life is full of potholes and bumps and accidents along the way. But it's not just your life. It's my life. It's their life. It's his life. It's her life. That's the journey that we're all on, and I get this real sense that you appreciate that, and you're kind of putting forward this comfort by telling these stories and saying, like, look, you're not the only one who has hard luck, and you're not saying that, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. You're saying, like, from my understanding, is that this is life. We're all in it. Let's appreciate the highs and let's appreciate the lows, because that's the things that define us as people. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it goes to, I'm writing the kinds of songs that I also like to listen to, and I'm really inspired by people that have a clever way with words and talk about real things. I want the music to be authentic. I'm big into songwriters like Jason Isbell and Casey Musgraves, are going back to like Townes Van Zandt and John Prine. I've really connected with like Rustin Kelly's music lately, because like his first record about recovering from addiction, it's just so raw and beautiful, and that's the kind of song that I get really invested in as a listener. And so that's kind of what I want to create. And I think that telling stories about partying in the summertime, that's fine. And I mean, the people love that music, but that's not what my life is at this point. And that doesn't kind of mesh with my experiences. And I like to tell those stories. I like finding beauty in things that aren't perfect. I love like abandoned buildings. Like I'll go down rat holes looking at pictures inside abandoned buildings for hours. I have a picture, you can't see it, up above my desk where I work here, and it's like this abandoned old brick barn with like a few trees with all the leaves off them, and it's kind of gloomy, but I think it's beautiful, and that's artistically something that I'm connected with.
I can appreciate
for whatever
that.
reason.
Like, I would go into those buildings myself and get lost thinking of all the things that happened here. In a home.
Yep.
This is the whole cycle of emotions, and in an industrial building, it's like, what are they making here? Like, who came to work here? What do they have for lunch? It's fun.
I think I was going to say one thing about Colin's songwriting that I find is like you're really in touch with your narrative with what you want to say. I think a lot of people have great ideas but don't know how to like really spit it out the right way. So whether it's autobiographical or not, I know a lot of your songs are fictional, which I love. They're still very genuine and honest. And I think that's one thing that a lot of songwriters have a lack of. They just write something because, this is what you sing about. This is what people, everything, whether it's about this or that, or it's yourself or just a created story, it's very honest and it's very believable. And you really just get into the story,
Are there songs on this album, Colin, that any in particular that you feel represent sort of like your evolution as a writer from album 1 to album 2?
Well, I think that most of them are an evolution. So there were a couple of songs that So 3 songs on this album were written before the first album came out. And one of them was Passerby, one of them was Bury Me, and the other one was part of a version of the song Inside Out. And I had done Inside Out. I liked the lyrics, but it was like a folky kind of fingerpick sort of thing. And the producer on the first record was like, meh, I like the lyrics, but you can do better. So, and that was Stephen Lewis, and I love him, and we have the same kind of relationship where he'll tell me if something I do is good, and he'll tell me if he's not into it. And he wasn't into that song, so I went and reworked it. So musically, that's a representation of my evolution, because I went and retooled that song, and Inside Out is one of the bangers on the album, I think. But other than that, like, everything's an evolution. I also took feedback, and this is something that musicians sometimes struggle with, but a couple of my close friends were like, in relation to my first album, they're like, it's cool, but it doesn't make me want to sing along, and a lot of it doesn't make me want to sing along. So if people aren't really listening to your lyrics, I'm not sure if they're getting it. So, and if you are a pretentious artist, you're going to say to that friend, you don't know anything about songwriting, leave me alone. And I was more like, I think that's really important feedback, because people aren't going to listen to the lyrics unless they connect with the music. So I started, just really focusing on the melody and listening to more pop music. And, that's something that Ariel's talked about as well. Just, I expanded my musical diet, and also, engaging with Ariel to help with melody. And he has that sensibility, 10 out of 10. And so everything is kind of an evolution, but some of the songs I think that I handled more elegantly. Like, some of the stuff on the first album's a little heavy-handed as far as how I talk about it. And, just through study and having the time to really edit and go through all the lines to say, okay, is there a better way that I can say this? Is there maybe a less direct way that I can say it? Like, I don't want everything to just be so literal. And it was a function of just taking the time and being willing to, say, like, this can be better. And yeah, like, take, from the school of, like, not to compare myself, because that's ridiculous. But I know that folks like Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits, who are also favorite songwriters of mine, they will agonize over a single line to make sure it's perfect. And once you know that, your heroes are sitting down there scratching their head with maybe a rhyming dictionary and a thesaurus and all that, trying to finesse these things, then you kind of give yourself permission to do that yourself. Or you convince yourself it's a necessity if you're going to be an excellent songwriter. And I'm not saying that I'm a world-class songwriter, and I'm not saying I'm a world-class singer or guitar player, but I'm always moving towards being those things. I'm trying to grow in that direction, because if I'm not, then I should find another career. And so that's it, just head down, doing work, reading books on songwriting, and just trying to hone the craft between album 1 and album 2. And, I think that it's definitely a big step up from the first one.
How did you go about picking the singles that rolled out before the album arrived?
Well, I wanted to pick songs that weren't particularly heavy subject matter. So, I wasn't going to put out The Workaround or Overcompensating as a single, despite the fact that I really believe in those songs. And To Mend had turned out so beautiful, and it was one of Ariel's favorite tracks. So for me, that was kind of the song where everything gelled together as far as the relationships between myself, the band, and JP. So that was a really good representation. And again, someone's favorite song. I think it's a strong song, but it's, again, not too heavy not too hard on the head. And a nice, country road song story. I thought that would be a good single. And then Inside Out is a banger. I wanted to kind of show a bit of a few different looks at the vibes on the album, and I thought that those 3 songs accomplished that.
Ariel, what are your favorite songs on this album?
Ooh. To Mend,
Curious.
definitely, I remember lyrically and like melodically, just overall big picture, like, To Mend really did hit me right out the get-go. And I think it hit someone that was doing some grant writing for you as well, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
yeah,
there was clearly something in the water on that song. I mean, I really do love them all. I love how every song just has a different thing. It's tough for me to pick my favorites. Putting me on the spot here. I think I like every song equally for what they are. I mean, like, Workaround and Circle K, I kind of put in their own category. Music, like if I was just talking musically and production wise, I mean, they kind of live in this own hemisphere of like this train beat, like trucking along, like hanging on for dear life. And then, your Inside Out and Passerby and Your Parade and did I say someone's favorite song? Those kind of mid-tempo, roots rockers, if you will. They kind of live in a hemisphere, and then you have like your overcompensating, Ready to Say. I guess To Mend would be in there. Bridge to Nowhere. Like, there's just, I can't pick one.
No, okay, I understand.
love them
That's
all.
kind of
They're all really great.
I feel bad for putting you on the spot that way.
No.
But
No, grill him.
when you're okay, well, let's think of it this way, Colin. When you're writing a song, you write. What's your process? Do you do you do lyrics first, then melody? Do you do melody then lyrics, or does it?
Yes.
Yeah, melody then lyrics.
No, just yes to all of it.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of different processes that I follow. And the one that I use the most often is that I'll sit down with a guitar and start just riffing on a musical idea, and then something will happen in my head that a melody will emerge, and I'll just start a recorder and hum it. And if there's like some words that might fit in there that might not even have meaning yet, I'll kind of do like a humming mumble track over what I'm playing on the guitar, and then just file it for later. And then, later I'll go back to those things and add more lyrics. Sometimes it'll just be a line. I'll overhear a line in a conversation, or I'll come up with a play on words in my head, and I have to write it down, and it'll sit in a pile somewhere until maybe a second or a third line hit me that will mesh up well with that, and then I'll go dig it out and I put them together, and a song starts to form. So sometimes it's music and melody followed by lyrics, and sometimes it's lyrics that'll drive it the other way around. There's not a whole lot of examples of songs that just came out in, like, I sat down with nothing and played a guitar and started singing something and came out with a song in, a few minutes. But two on the record that happened, the song was written, at least the first pass of the song was written within half an hour, are Overcompensating and The Workaround. And so I just sat down and a song happened. And I can't even tell you what came first. It just all sort of came to me at once.
The reason I ask that is because I find that the tone of the melody complements the lyrics on all of these songs really well. So on a song that maybe a bit of a downer to some, when you're talking about some serious emotional things, the melodic accompaniment that you've chosen for those words fits the mood of the story, and that's what I was kind of like. How did you marry the two? Like, do you have a melody, and then you think, all right, what's the this story might work with this tone, or is that part of the process at all?
It is. So I mean, some of the melody type stuff was touched on in pre-production as well. But I think that a lot of, at least the main melodies were generally intact from where I started writing the songs. But what I'll typically do is I'll just play the backing chords and the lyrics, and I'll just improvise a melody in my head and sing it. I'm not yet to the point as a guitar player where every idea that enters my head can come out through my hands. But with my voice as an instrument, if I hear it, I can sing it. And so that's what I'll kind of do, is I'll play around, just load the chords into a recorder and just work the melody. And if something isn't quite right, if there's an immediate solution, then I'll solve it on the spot, or maybe I just leave it and go back to it later. So these are all the things that wind up getting refined after the fact. And through the recording process on this, something that I was probably guilty of a lot more before would have been over singing. So going for the higher notes on in some of these songs where maybe it didn't belong. And Ariel gave me a lot of coaching on trying to find where was my sweet spot for singing. And I think we landed more on sort of a slightly more reserved, kind of weary storyteller sort of vibe to what I was doing. So that would have involved bringing some of the melodies down into a different register to fit. So now going forward, I'm more mindful of that. So, it's a combination of improvising. Occasionally I will sit down with a guitar or a keyboard and actually plot out different potential melody lines or notes in order to make something fit better. But it's all part of that initial creation and then endless molding and editing afterwards. And I'll still change the melody of some of these songs as we go forward and I sing them live. I'm sure it'll happen.
Yeah. Ariel, sorry, I had my train of thought. Oh, I was looking at Colin, when we spoke a few months ago, you made a really interesting point. You said that people respond to music in three ways. And I think this is
his quote.
Ariel?
Yeah, this is Ariel's a direct quote.
Yeah, when somebody sings a really high note, or when somebody plays something really fast, or you know why you're reacting when you experience those things. But the most important response comes from the result of dynamics. And that's an excellent point. Ariel, do you have a method or an approach that you take when you're looking at plotting dynamics for a song's emotional content?
100%. Just as lyrics tell a story, the music has to tell a story too. And we do that by building intensity, building tension, and dynamics is one of those things that serves that very well. So, I mean, hey, great, if we're blasting through at this level the whole time, it's not going to feel like much of a journey, as opposed to, we're going to start here. Okay, first verse, let's bring it back down. Let's build up to that first chorus, come back down maybe halfway. Second chorus, maybe a touch more. A bridge, instrumental. Last chorus, let's go crazy. It should be like a movie. It's just like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And if you have something really great, and if you do that thing that's really great all the time, it starts to not mean a lot. So, for example, Colin, who's a fantastic singer, he can hold his own against the best of them, and he can really wail too. If that's what we do all the time, it's really going to devalue that great quality of many qualities of his singing. So, just using that as an example, his vocal performance, you want to ease into it. You want to ease, there's a very big difference between singing live and singing for a record. And singing live, there's the energy of being in a room or a venue with people there, and you react to that and you feel that energy. On a record, it's a very different experience where you have to kind of have restraint and engage yourself. And I've learned this a lot in my own experience of just when I would push a lot, it wouldn't necessarily be the right tone I was going after with my voice, so to speak. And the more you save, just because you can do something doesn't mean we should be doing it all the time or doing it right away. The more we save it and use it when it's that right moment, like for example, Passerby is this song where it's a gradual build to the end, and Colin's vocal starts from just very casual. That first chorus, he picks it up a little bit, picks up a little from where he left off on that first verse for the second verse. The second chorus, he's saying a bit more, like his intensity, his dynamics are picking up. And then there's a little instrumental. And then a last verse, he comes back down to that first verse level. And that last chorus, he's going, okay, here is the moment. And you really feel it. And there's so much more payoff and satisfaction to it because you feel like you've earned that moment rather than just like, oh, here's someone singing loud and proud and awesome. It's like, wow, I felt that. And that's the kind of things that live you want to feel. And I think that's the way in a studio recording kind of environment you can kind of get that kind of thing too. So yeah, dynamics are not just for the vocals, they're for the drums, guitar, everything. Even the mix has to have dynamics and build. So I think that's the most important thing for sure.
And we started the record off with a song that demonstrates that. I thought it was a great way to introduce the record, Bridge to Nowhere, where it starts with just me finger picking my guitar. Then I start to sing, and then the piano comes in and the bass, I think, as we advance, and we don't even bring the band and the drums in until after the first chorus. Like first chorus, yeah. Ariel starts to bring in some ambient slide guitar over the top. Cody starts to do just some basic textures on cymbals and whatnot, and then boom, verse 2, the band's in. So I thought it was a great symbolic way to start the record. Like, here, me and a guitar, you're used to this. Then, oh, this is a little different. This is a little different. Oh, holy shit.
And it's the build, and then you realize the first time you have full-on, wow, chorus groove, you're halfway through, you're already on the second chorus, and you still have a lot more to say, rather than like spilling everything out right out the gate, you know? So yeah, I think that's a great first choice of like how to start a record. I mean, if you did a breakdown of any of these songs, I'm not saying that like we nailed it, we killed it, we're the masters. You will see that progression. Like if Colin opened up a session of one of these songs and said, well, let's listen to just how it grows here, you'd see the trajectory. You'd see and hear how we edited everything so that everything has a purpose. Like for example, the B3 and the pedal steel, and especially the guitars. For the amount of guitars I recorded, half of them got cut, or let's just use it in this second verse and onward. Let's just use it in this bridge onward. And that's a huge part of it. It's just impact. Not just playing something to play it, but to just have it mean something. And that's some of the most time-consuming stuff about, or one of the most time-consuming parts about putting together an album is that editing process, to make sure everything is sitting in the right place. Not too much of anything, not too little. Often it's less is more, but yeah. Makes all the difference.
I guess one last thing that I wanted to squeeze into this conversation. I wanted to try to rope your family in on this for just 1 second, if I can.
Sure, man.
For you to be isolated and or away for a month to make this record at a point in human history when life isn't necessarily simple for everyone. That's incredible. What's the support of your family? How much is that? Can you comment on that and how that's contributed to your place as an artist and to the creation of this album?
Well, I mean, I couldn't do this without my family's support. I mean, I have a wife and 2 daughters, so there's mouths to feed, and my wife has continued to work full time throughout this thing, and there was never any debate or question or anything that this had to happen, right? It was like, all right, let's how are we going to make this work? Okay, we go right into planning mode, and honestly, my wife isn't even a big music fan. For her, music is something that supports another activity, usually dancing, and my music, if there's for a particular kind of person, maybe my music is dance music, but that's not most people. And but they have the utmost support of what I'm doing, even though they would probably, if I didn't make it, they wouldn't listen to the type of music I make. And yeah, everyone just kind of gets it and supports me in making things happen. And now that they've been locked in a house with me for a year and a half playing my guitars all the time, they're probably very much looking forward to the next time that they get to spend 4 to 5 weeks without me. So,
Nice.
somebody made a comment to my wife, and they said, it must be wonderful being surrounded by music all the time. And she just like bit her lip and kind of said, yeah. And then she's like, I don't think they understand that I don't hear this beautiful finished music in the house, I hear you playing the things that you suck at over and over and over and over again. I can hum that guitar solo that you just wrote for that song. I know it as well as you do. And so I don't think that that's just part of the thing that they endure in order to support me. It's not a thing of beauty, right?
Yeah, that is family of a musician 101.
Yep,
Completely different experience.
it very much is.
So you get this. You have an album that's full of wide-ranging, broad arrangements, but as a performer, there's probably more times than not that you are going to be taking these songs solo.
Absolutely.
What's your process like to scale these down? I guess they were written on a guitar as a man with a voice. What's it like to go back to that after you've dressed them up so beautifully?
For me, it presents a new challenge in a very good way, like in a rewarding way. So, I mean, if you go through and on 10 out of the 12 tracks, you can mute everything except for my voice and my acoustic guitar, and it's sort of a modified version of how I wrote the song, and it's at the core of all of them. There was one track, Circle K, that the style that we were going for on the acoustic guitar is not something that was in my vocabulary. And that's one of the things that after I came home, I worked on for 2 days and, drove my family nuts, like sort of rubber hand strumming, because I came from a finger picking background. So now I can play the song. But at the time, like Ariel stepped into the booth and recorded that one. But 10 of the other, of the 12 tracks, it's me and the guitar are down the middle. So now I take that foundation and I'll try and capture some of the little ideas and melodic hooks that he added or the steel added, just little bits, and try and work that into my guitar playing so that now when I sit down and play them just singing on an acoustic, they're more interesting than when we started, because I'm drawing from the creativity of the people that contributed to the record, but it's a natural progression for me to go back to playing them on acoustic because that's where they started. And so I'll definitely tour these and perform them solo. I always like, when possible, to play with a sideman who's able to cover some harmonies, add a little bit and just have another musician to riff off of and have your back. But at least 75% of my shows are just me by myself and a guitar at this point in my career. So I take it as a challenge to go and work through the songs again and see what I can add with the same kind of mindset that I learned from Ariel and the team in the production process, to bring dynamics to a solo acoustic guitar performance. Start by playing sparsely, add more intensity, back it off. And so yeah, I'm taking those lessons gladly and reinterpreting the solo arrangements of these songs as a result. And they're really fun to play.
You took that approach when you were producing this album, didn't you, Ariel? Understanding that Colin would most likely be delivering these songs as a solo performer. I believe when we talked a while back, you said that you wanted to keep the acoustic guitar and the voice at the heart of the song. Is that?
Of course. I mean, at the end of the day, these songs were written acoustic and vocal. Every demo he sent me was acoustic and vocal. We just put elements on top of that, tightened up some arrangement things, maybe added some candy here and there. If anything, Colin should be able to go back to how these songs were written, except now that it's more so, it's not like he has to rework going back to acoustic. There's just new elements that were added. Some little minor, I don't even want to say upgrades, just minor embellishments that are there now to do it. And all these songs are still at the core of what they were. Again, I'm very adamant about like not changing what is there to begin with, because what he brought from the beginning was so great. It didn't need to be changed. It didn't need to be. The core of it remains the same. You could make an acoustic version of this record just using the acoustic and the vocal. I didn't even think about it that way, but it's kind of true.
Yeah,
you really could.
I've grown as a guitar player since, because that's been like a big focus of mine. So I actually look forward to now coming up with interesting arrangements, with skills new and old to really make these pop as just solo songs. It's been a lot of fun.
I mean, my experience personally, you write these songs, you've been sitting on them for a long time, you finally record them. For me, it's always like, okay, once I record these songs, give me a year with them, playing them on stage, and then I'll be like, then we'll really be saying something live.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah.
Because even though they're your songs, you've written them and you've been sitting with them, you relearn your songs a lot better over time, and it's not like even relearning, but getting to know them a lot better.
Yeah.
I think everyone that writes songs experiences that. The people that write songs and perform them, you learn things about them and you get more comfortable with them over time, and you add things in. That's just a part of the cool process of performing your own music.
And it's why it's better to be a musician than a comedian, because when we write a good song, we have a piece of content that we can keep reusing for the rest of our lives. And as soon as a comedian records it, it's done, right? Can't use it anymore.
Yeah.
And also, just to keep yourself interested, I like to just revisit something and just change things to keep it fresh for myself, so that, like, part of these songs, the delivery has to be authentic, it has to be passionate. Like, if I go in and mail in a performance on this music, it does not work. And so a lot of times I'm sitting in an intimate setting. More and more of my shows are like soft seater venues where people are buying their ticket, they're sitting in front of me and they're listening to me perform my music. And you have to be emotionally invested in those performances. And I find that coming up with guitar arrangements that keep me emotionally invested, everything I can do to stay motivated, stay inspired by the songs, I do those things, and they'll continue to evolve for years.
Nice. That's all I have.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you so
great?
much.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for asking. I'm happy to be involved in helping more people hear this record, because I think it's an important album. And congrats to both of you for putting this together.
Thank you. And I appreciate both of your time too. You've both been extremely helpful and generous. So
My pleasure, man.
It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful.
Of course.
We're already. Ariel was texting me about the next one. He's like, I found a studio that we're gonna have to do the next one at. He's like, I don't mean to jump the gun. I'm like, well, you're at the top of my call list, so.
I was gonna ask. So when are you guys gonna work together on the next project? But I'm glad to know that might happen. They got a long way to go between now and then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never assume, but I mean, if I was in the running, of course, I'd jump at the chance of doing it again. Yeah.
At this point, it's like I can't even envision, who else I would want to work with on the next one, right? So no slight against Ariel. So unless like Dave Cobb or Phineas give me a call and say, we're gonna do some work together, then he's gonna be on the list, man. So we'll just be figuring out the availability. I gotta write some songs.
We got a good thing.
We got a really good thing going. I really my goal, dream, if you want to call that, is at some point down the road to be able to play the music live with the folks that made the record. And I know that that's not normally how these things work, but just the team is so incredible, and I know that the B3 and the Steel might be a little hard to get a hold of, but Cody and Julian, they were Ariel's backing band at Harvest, and that unit is so incredible that that's something we're gonna have to make happen when the world allows.
We'll make it happen. It's gonna.
Brother,
I'm sure.
I can't
I'm
wait.
sure we would have done it had
We would have,
not
yeah.
done all this. Yeah.
Because
It'll happen, man.
we probably could have figured out like a soft cedar tour, made it worth Ariel's while to come down and play Atlantic Canada and do a rip. So we're gonna keep hounding him till he gets out east and we make some music together for sure.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, man.
All right, you guys. Nice to see you
Thank
both.
you, Matt.
Enjoy the rest of your day.